Aloha everyone, what is really good my dudes? Welcome to another RuneScape news coverage video. For this video we're going to be talking about new lighting and reflection techniques that Jagex is going to be implementing to help out some of the lighting issues in the game. So without any further ado, let's jump right into the video. Let's go.
Cats is the illest. What you talking about, Willis?
Alright guys, this is all information coming from the latest live stream. I've decided to break this video down into two videos. Tomorrow we'll talk about the player avatar and the changes made there, but this video specifically I want to talk about a new solution that they have been working on in order to address some of the lighting issues. What I mean by that is certain outfits, cosmetic or actual items, weapons even, that tend to use the new metallic render system have very weird effects when they're in certain game areas. And the colors of these items tend to look very washed out or have a very weird tint that doesn't quite make sense and does not look as advertised. So after this update, all outfits should be set in the game world properly and look like they belong in that area, and the lighting and coloring should match properly. Now the cause of this problem is due to the cube maps, which we will go into further detail as to what they are and how they function later on in the video, but that is the core aim of the fix, to fix the cube maps, and the rest should work fine. Now when Jagex updated the render system for metallic objects, they now use physically based rendering, which allows them to assign surfaces a roughness or smoothness or somewhere in between, and this will determine how much reflection there is on that object, as well as how dim or bright it should appear in the world. This render system works perfectly in-game already. The only problem is, as I said, those cube maps, so let's get into it. Now in more modern games, specifically the more expensive AAA titles, they are able to render reflections in real time. So when you see a reflection on an object, you're actually seeing a real reflection of everything surrounding that object. That, however, is very expensive in terms of compute power, so a lot of games, including Jagex, tend to go with a different approach. And that is what the cube maps are. Essentially, they are a 3D image of the surrounding area that isn't a one-to-one match, but looks fairly similar to that surrounding area. The problem with RuneScape's cube maps is that they were made either a long time ago or they are added to map squares inconsistently. Also, some of them have wrong values to work with their current render system. A good example of the wrong cube map on the wrong map square is the Lost Grove. As you're seeing here on screen, the cube map is that square thing represented in the corner, and you can see here that with these metallic objects, for some reason or another, the cube map assigned to the Lost Grove is a desert cube map. So the reflections you're seeing on those metallic objects are of sand, which doesn't quite make sense and ultimately makes the coloring of those objects not make any sense and not feel like they fit in that area. It doesn't make much sense that they would be reflecting a yellow color when there's no yellow light to produce that. And that is the core of the problem with all of these lighting details that you've seen with your armor pieces, your cosmetics, your weapons, things like that, that all use this metal rendering system. They also have a ton of map squares that have no cube maps. In those scenarios, they have a default cube map. You can see here, it's just basically a plain black with a couple of light or white highlights. And it doesn't necessarily look bad placed in this environment, but it does look a little artificial and not really grounded in the game world. You'll see a difference later when we do a comparison before and after, but that's basically the crux of what's going on here. So in the game, in RuneScape currently, we have 5,000 or more map squares, and it would be a very tedious job to create brand new cube maps for all of those map squares. So they have created tools that essentially do it for them. With this, they were able to map the whole surface of the world with all the cube maps and create specific cube maps to those areas that match the look of those areas specifically. You can see on screen here, they're using a spherical capture. This is basically how they're able to get these cube maps using a technique that wraps around the entire scene, and then that image can be taken, then reflected later on. Now I want to go into an example of basically making a cube map. Here we have a generic cube map for essentially just a brown cave. There's a ton of brown caves in the game, and this works pretty much fine for a large portion of the game. This is a perfect cube map for those areas. Now what Jagex will do is take this image and stylize it to match their artistic specifications. So what they've done is they push the horizon downward, they give it a purple sky because it gives it a nicer effect. It looks much nicer than just reflecting solid black. And there obviously is no sky because you're in a cave, so you need to reflect something, so they go with this purple look as a stylized choice. Not only that, they've chosen to blur the image, which is also a stylistic choice. They do not want a mirror finish in terms of their reflections. They want it slightly blurred, which is again done for no other reason than the art style they're going for, but it works out fine. After that, they add in a couple of additional light sources here and there, so they're represented as basically just orange specks or orange orbs. And these will represent, torches or lava or any other type of light source found in, generally most caves. As you're panning over or rotating your camera, it'll look much better when you see these little specks of orange light here and there along the reflections of your armor and metallic weapons. They obviously don't need to be extremely detailed, but they do need to give a sense that they are reflecting something real in the world. Next up, I'll show an example of this new rendering system reflecting the proper cube maps in the proper locations. So here you are seeing Davendale, which is the new mobile tutorial island, using a Davendale cube map. So you can clearly see the reflections totally match the given area, and these objects actually look like they're set in the world properly in terms of their lighting. You can see even more specifically with the sphere that even though the cube map is, as I said, not a one-to-one reflection of the surrounding area, it looks like it's actually reflecting the area because the cube map it is taking from matches the map square that they are in, which gives you enough of a feel to seem like you're looking at a real reflection even though you're not. Next up, I want to go into some before and after so you can actually see what I'm talking about and how those changes have made a difference. First off, we're starting off with this cave here. This one doesn't have a reflection map, so it uses the default one I talked about earlier, which is basically just a plain black square with a couple of white highlights. You can see here the reflections are very dark and don't necessarily fit. Now we move into the after image, and you can see they're using the cube map that we showed off earlier with the brown cave, and the difference is night and day. Next up, we got the Lost Grove with that improper desert cube map being replaced with a cube map fit for that area, and you can see here, this is probably one of the areas where the difference is the strongest. And now these objects look like they actually are set in this area. Moving on, we got the Eastern Lands. This particular area, for some reason, has a very blue tint to all the metallic objects in the area. So now with a proper cube map, you can see the reflections look far better and are way more cohesive. So that's pretty much it. That's cube maps. That's how they're going to work, or that's how they're changing them to make them look much better in terms of the lighting and in terms of the reflection for all metallic objects in the game, and how they will look going forward when this is implemented. I don't have an ETA on this update, but hopefully we'll get more information as time goes on, and I'll let you know then. The last thing I want to talk about is Jagex has took the time to take some of these rendering techniques and apply them to the player models, more specifically the menu models. So these aren't really going to affect the in-game models of your character. This is going to affect things like the model that you see in the character creation screen, as well as your wardrobe when you're changing out your cosmetics, because your character in the actual game world is going to be affected by the lighting effects that we talked about earlier. So it doesn't need this. But as I said, they're doing a whole lot with lighting for these particular menu models. Things like specular lighting, they're giving them more surface detail. They're doing the cube map lighting like I talked about earlier in the video. They're also adding shadows as well as subsurface light occlusion. This also affects not only, as I said, character creation and wardrobe, but also the chat heads. So you can see a side-by-side comparison of the difference between the chat heads of the past and the chat heads after this update, and you can see it's a big change. This is still very much a work in progress. For example, I think some of the darker skin tones look a little too shiny, but that can all be changed as time goes on. You can also see here's a picture thanks to I'm Rubik, who has compiled a couple of the before and afters for some of the outfits. So you can see exactly the change that has been made with each of these, and you can see the level of detail simply changing some of the lighting and the shadows and things like that has on a piece of equipment or outfit piece. And I think a lot of people are going to appreciate this update. It's a significant change and improvements as you're seeing here on screen. And that is pretty much it for today's update. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about specifically the changes with the player avatar that was talked about on the live stream this week. So I will see you with that video tomorrow. With that, I'm going to wrap it up here. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button. If you're not subscribed and you want to stay up to date on all things RuneScape related, then hit that subscribe button. Anyways, I appreciate you watching. I am out. Aloha.
Cats is the illest. What you talking about, Willis?